Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm Tami, fibromyalgia coach, author, and founder of the International Fibromyalgia Coaching Institute. The goal of this podcast is to empower you with access to the dream team of experts and coaches I've discovered are key to living the fibro life you love. From the comfort of your own home, and maybe even your pajamas, I'll help you take back control of your life and health. To help out with FibroFog, I always include full show notes and additional resources at fibromyalgiapodcast.com. You're listening to the Fibromyalgia Podcast with Tami, episode 20. Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami. And today's episode is going to be our second Ask the Coach episode. This is our Dear Tami episode where I answer questions sent in by you, by the listeners. And today we're going to be talking about weight gain and weight loss with fibromyalgia. And I'll read that question in just a minute. Before we get to that, though, I do want to read a little note that I received after episode 16, which was our episode on fibromyalgia in children with Dr. Melissa Congdon. She says, "Oh my gosh, Tami, I have been in tears through episode 16. So many questions now have answers, at least in my mind. I am positive my middle girl had fibromyalgia starting at age 3. Oh, I wish we had heard of your podcast back then, but it was 1978. We didn't even know about the internet yet. I'm praying she finds a doctor that will diagnose her properly, but at this late date, there's so many other issues at hand." And I just wanted to share that because if you haven't listened to episode 16, I highly encourage that you do it. I believe that it's actually our most powerful episode to date. So I really hope that you'll go take a listen to that. It answered a lot of questions for me as well from my childhood and growing up in a body that didn't quite work like everybody else's. So I also want to give a little disclaimer here, actually 2 disclaimers. First off, I just want to remind everyone the things that you hear in this podcast. I'm a coach. I'm not a doctor. I don't even know you and your situation. Most of you I haven't talked to, so please don't consider this as medical advice. It's definitely not meant to replace you talking with your doctor, and just take it as information and education. The second little disclaimer I want to give you is kind of a funny one, and that's the fact that the Blue Angels are flying overhead. They're doing a show for the next half an hour, so you might hear them buzzing around my house as I record this episode. So if you hear military jets in the background, that is what's going on there. So just wanted to, in case you guys heard. Okay, so let me read the email that I received for today's Ask the Coach. She said, "Hi, your podcast is changing my life. Thank you so much. My question is, how do you lose weight when you have fibromyalgia? Do you recommend a program or have any tips? My doctor recommended a nutritionist, and then she also mentioned some particular programs, which we're not going to mention by name here just for liability's sake. So the question is, how do you lose weight when you have fibromyalgia? And I'm actually going to back up a step and talk about why it is that we gain weight in the first place. Because I think a lot of people start with the wrong question. They start with the question of, how do I lose weight? Because let's be honest, like that's what we care about. That's what we're worried about. But if we don't understand why we gained the weight in the first place, then we might not be doing the right thing to get the outcome that we want. So I think it's really important, especially with fibromyalgia, to understand this because there are a lot of things going on in our bodies that make it so easy for us to gain weight and so hard for us to lose weight. And so I really want to go over that. I also want to make it super clear that these things that are happening in your body, they're not your fault. They are part of the illness of fibromyalgia. And so if you, or if there's people in your lives, if you hear those negative voices in your head about why you maybe have gained weight, I want you to know it's not your fault. And this is very, very normal with fibromyalgia. That doesn't mean we don't want to change it, of course, but I want you to understand that it's not your fault and that it is very, very normal. So nearly 3/4 of all fibromyalgia patients are clinically overweight or obese. Now, those are medical terms, so I want to define those for you so that you have an idea here. So clinically overweight means 5 to about 30 pounds over what is considered your ideal weight. Clinically obese is more than 30 pounds overweight. 3/4 of all fibromyalgia patients fall into this category. Now, there are a bunch of surveys that have been done just asking fibromyalgia patients, lots of different things like, are you able to work? How old are you? All of this kind of stuff. And one of the questions was looking at weight. And this particular survey, which was done at Oregon Health and Science University, they did an internet survey of about 2,500 fibro patients. This was quite a few years ago, but they found that on average, the people who answered that survey were around 32 pounds overweight, and they had gained about 50 pounds since high school. In my own life, I can tell you that when I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, like that was one of the things that happened was I had gained a bunch of weight. Some of the medications that I had a side effect of weight gain. One of the medications, oh my gosh, you guys, one of the medications that I took to try to manage my migraines, I literally gained 4 pounds a week on that medication. You can't safely lose weight enough to keep up with that. Again, that's like totally not your fault. When these medications cause a side effect of weight gain, it's not because you're, lazy or because you are a glutton or anything like that. This is like something biologically happening in your body. So let's talk about some of those things that are happening. One, obviously, is our diet. When you have fibromyalgia, we don't have energy to go grocery shopping. We often don't have energy to cook. It's so much easier to just use prepackaged food, takeout, fast food, frozen foods. We just don't have a lot of energy. So we do shortcuts where we can. And it's just so much easier to pick something up on the way home than it is to cook something at home. And so often we are getting foods that probably aren't the best for us, right? So that is part of it. We also tend to look towards comfort foods, which tend to be higher in fats, high in sugar, higher in carbs. So yes, our diet is absolutely a part of it. And yes, your doctors are right. Exercise is also part of why we've gained the weight. And if you look back over by the way, you guys, yes, I'm starting with the obvious things, but we're going to get to other things in just a minute. I'm just getting these out of the way because these are the ones your doctors are talking about. So yes, this is part of the picture. So with exercise, with fibromyalgia, when I'm using the term exercise, I'm just talking about how much your body moves. Right? So as you develop fibromyalgia, as you have more pain, as you have more fatigue, as you have worse sleep and you're exhausted, then yes, our activity level decreases. And so quite often we are starting to intake more calories, but we are also expending fewer calories. So that math adds up to weight gain. Like I mentioned already, a lot of our medications have a side effect of weight gain. I have had a lot of clients who have gained a lot of weight on Lyrica, on Savella. I don't see it as much with Cymbalta, but it does. Most of the time that I've had clients come off of Lyrica and Savella, it's because they've gained so much weight. And like I said, the one medication I used to try to manage my migraines, I gained 4 pounds a week. So there's a lot of that going on. Pain also is a factor in that. That's where we do things like self-medicating. And I don't necessarily mean self-medicating with drugs or alcohol, although that can sometimes be part of it. It also means self-medicating with things like food, maybe chocolate, maybe ice cream, all of that kind of stuff. Another thing that happens with pain is that it increases our cortisol as a response to our body being continually under the stress of having pain. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute about why cortisol is a factor there. With fibromyalgia, we often have undiagnosed food allergies or poor digestion, which means our bodies aren't processing the food that we eat. So we're actually starving for nutrients, which can often lead to cravings. So I'll give you an interesting example. If you ever have craved ice cream in the evening or a bowl of cereal and milk in the evening, what may be happening there is your brain may be starving for serotonin. Here's what happens in the body. So in the evening, when it starts getting darker, your body switches from serotonin over to starting to produce melatonin, which of course is how you start getting sleepy and fall asleep at night. Well, when you start making melatonin, it makes that from the same pathway that makes your serotonin. So that means your level of serotonin goes down as you start switching the assembly line, so to speak, over to making melatonin. So your brain says, help, I need more serotonin. Well, serotonin is one of those neurotransmitters that can be hard to get from the food that you eat. When you are, tryptophans, all of the other amino acids that you get from protein and things like that. Everything else tends to absorb before you get the building blocks that you need for your brain to make serotonin. Also, your gut makes a lot of your serotonin, and we have poor digestion, right? So we've got extra trouble here. When you have a high sugar meal that also has some protein in it, so ice cream and cereal with milk, especially sugary cereal with milk, that sugar changes the process in your body so that more of the building blocks get absorbed for your brain to make serotonin. So things like craving ice cream, sugary cereal, and milk in the evening lets the ingredients in that you need to make serotonin. So those cravings, again, aren't necessarily your fault. It's your body saying, hey, I need serotonin, help me. Sometimes we will have cravings because our blood sugar isn't stable. And when our blood sugar isn't stable, our pain is also unstable. Another thing that happens with fibromyalgia is we have mitochondrial dysfunction. Your mitochondria are the little power cells in each of the cells of your body. It's like the little batteries that live within your body. And those don't work quite right in fibromyalgia. Sometimes our mitochondrial dysfunction is so bad that we might not even have enough energy to convert the food we eat into fuel for our bodies to use. So sometimes that food that we eat just gets stored as fat instead of turned into energy. So if you're gaining weight but you're still exhausted, this could be part of what's happening here. Now I want to talk about cortisol. I mentioned it earlier. This is a stress hormone produced by your adrenals, and there are good things about it and there are bad things about it. So your cortisol level is part of what helps you wake up in the morning, and your falling cortisol at night is part of what allows you to fall asleep. That's a whole nother podcast episode to talk about your adrenals and your cortisol levels. But for now, what I want you to know is that Number one, our bodies don't really know the difference between good stress and bad stress. Stress is stress, right? If you've ever gotten married or moved into a brand new house, you know that even good things are stressful, right? And so that same thing happens in our body. And when we're stressed, we produce more cortisol. Our cortisol, one of the things it does is it tells our bodies that we need to eat more sugary carbs. We need fast, quick burning fuel so that we can fight or flight, right? That's the fight or flight response. We need that quick burning fuel so that we have energy to fight off that tiger or run away from the tiger, right? The other thing that cortisol tells our bodies to do is it tells the body what fuel to burn and whether or not to store food as fat. So typically, if you have a lot of cortisol running through your system, you'll notice weight gain around the middle of your body. That's one of the typical places to see cortisol weight gain. And this is also why worrying about gaining weight is actually going to cause you to gain even more weight. So if you are stressing out over your weight, over that number on the scale, it's going to make it even harder to lose weight because your body is in the mode of, number one, craving sugar and carbs, and number two, storing food as fat. So it's a double whammy problem there for us. So you've got to make sure that you control your stress. There's lots of things, of course, you can do for that. And again, that's a whole nother podcast episode. But I want you to understand that as fibromyalgia patients, our bodies are often stuck in fight or flight. We often have cortisol issues. Too much cortisol, not enough cortisol, cortisol at the wrong time. There's a lot of things going on there. And so this absolutely can affect the weight that we gain and the way that our bodies crave fuel and burn fuel. Another massive thing with fibromyalgia is sleep. So get this. There was a study done at University of Chicago. They looked at the hormone levels that were affected after just 2 nights of bad sleep. Now, anybody listening to this podcast, I know you have had more than 2 nights of bad sleep, right? So that means take whatever you're seeing here and multiply it times 1,000, right? So after just 2 nights of poor sleep, the people in the study specifically craved high sugar, high salt, starchy food. So things like fries and a milkshake, right? So these hormones that were affected were the hormones that suppress your appetite. So the things that tell you, okay, keep you from being hungry or feeling satisfied. The other hormone triggers hunger. And they went the wrong direction, right? So the one that suppresses appetite didn't have enough of it, which meant your appetite wasn't suppressed. And the hormone that triggers hunger, there was too much of it. So you were even hungrier. So you see how it's like the teeter-totter going the wrong way. And so they're also, interestingly, so these two hormones, leptin, which suppresses your appetite, and ghrelin, which triggers the hunger. Now, there was a 2013 study at Stanford, which was really, really interesting, that looked at the correlation between leptin and fatigue in chronic fatigue patients. So there's a lot more going on here than just weight gain. So there's, like I said, lots going on. There was also, I found this study super interesting. So this one was done in France. They took a group of 20-year-old men. They had 2 groups. One group had 4 hours of sleep. The other group had 8 hours of sleep. Then they watched what they ate during the day. They gave them breakfast, they gave them lunch, they let them have a buffet for dinner so that they could kind of see what people ate differently. Those who had 4 hours of sleep craved about 550 calories more per day, which would add up to about a 1 pound gain per week in weight. Now, we have got terrible sleep. So if you think about just this French study of getting not enough sleep, gaining about a pound a week, and then you factor in how long maybe you've had fibromyalgia. For me, it's been 12 years, right? 12 years times 52 weeks. I don't want to do that math. So sleep is a huge, huge part of this. If you still have bad sleep, then it's going to make it super, super difficult for you to lose weight, even if you eat everything perfectly, because the hormones in your body are going to be off that are changing what you crave. So it's going to make it a lot harder for you to make good choices. And it's also changing how your body processes the food that you eat. So sleep is really huge. Your thyroid is also a big, big part of this. If your thyroid is running low, if you're hypothyroid, one of the main symptoms of that is weight gain. So again, almost every fibromyalgia patient I have ever worked with has had thyroid and adrenal issues. Not all of them, but almost all of them. So this is a factor as well, which of course just simply means that these are all things that you'll want to address with your doctor and make sure that these things are all functioning properly in order to make the efforts that you use to lose weight to make them effective, right? So just to give you a short, quick, what do we do then? Number one, you want to make sure you're talking with your doctor. You want to make sure that your thyroid is functioning properly, that your adrenals are functioning properly, that your neurotransmitters, your dopamine, your serotonin, your norepinephrine, that those things are all where they should be. You want to make sure that you are living in a way that is reducing your stress to reduce those cortisol levels, and that you're also living in a way that helps your mitochondria work as well as possible. Ultimately, the answer to our readers, or should I say our listeners' question of how do I lose weight with fibromyalgia? The answer is very, very individualized. I have seen people lose weight just by having peer support, having a buddy that they work with or a coach that's keeping them accountable. I've seen people lose weight with things like keto diets or paleo diets, or even just counting calories. Like, I have seen so many different things work. But in the long run, all the studies show that diets, quote unquote diets, do not work. So there was a UCLA study from back in 2007. They followed people for over 2 years, and 83% of those gained back more weight than they lost over those 2 years. So for me, and what I would encourage you, is focus instead not on the losing weight, but on having your body be healthy. Focus on having good thyroid function. Focus on giving your body the nutrients that it needs to be healthy. The number on the scale and the size that you wear is much, much less important than how healthy you are. Whether or not you have the energy to live the life you want to live, whether or not you have pain every day. Those are the things that are important. And yes, there are some dietary things and exercise things that can help make those things better, that can help make that better for you. For instance, we know with fibromyalgia that having sugar in your diet is one of the things that can cause additional pain. We know that an anti-inflammatory diet can help. And as far as, this is so funny because this just came up today. I was in a store and heard two women talking, and one of the ladies was talking about how she had just had a blood test done to figure out what her food allergies were, and she was allergic to things like kale. So, just because it's healthy doesn't mean it's good for you. So an anti-inflammatory diet is going to have space in there to be customizable for you. Now, there are some things that we know are not good for anybody. MSG is one, artificial sweeteners is one, sugar is another. There are other things that are bad for some people, but not everybody, like this woman who is allergic to kale. The woman she was talking to said that if she ate lima beans, she would go into anaphylactic shock. So you just things that maybe potentially you think are healthy might not actually be healthy for you. So we want to listen to your body. We want to make sure that you keep your body happy and pay attention. There are things out there that can help you find answers faster, but really just pay attention to how you feel. There was one client that I worked with, and I had her keep a food diary for a few months. And we discovered that every time she ate tomatoes, 2 days later, her pain levels would be higher. That is not something that you would be able to figure out on your own without tracking your food and looking for those patterns. Because, 2 days, oh my gosh, can you even remember what you ate 2 days ago? So doing things like keeping a food diary or doing an ELISA test to see what your food allergies are, those kinds of things can be very helpful. Again, there are some things we know for sure are going to cause inflammation and pain in fibromyalgia patients. We know sugar, we know MSG, and we know artificial sweeteners. I highly recommend Dr. Lipton's book, The Fibro Food Formula. We will definitely link to that in the show notes for today's episode. And of course, I'll link to all of the studies that I mentioned in this episode for you, so you can take a look at that. In terms of things like exercise and moving more, that's a whole nother podcast episode. We are already at our time for this episode, so I'm not going to go into that, but just know that there are right and wrong ways to exercise with fibromyalgia, and most people are not being taught how to properly exercise with fibromyalgia. So yes, there are ways you can do that. And yes, it is different than what a healthy person or a normal person would do. So keep that in mind. All right. So with that, I'm going to kind of wrap it up here today. I hope that answers your question a little bit. I know it does and it doesn't at the same time. So do make sure that you're talking with your doctor, that you're researching all of those things that could be contributing to your body not functioning properly, that are making you gain the weight or making it hard for you to lose weight. Address that first. You also want to start addressing your self-care, your self-talk, your stress management, again, to help manage those things that are happening biologically that are making it harder for you to lose weight and making it super easy to gain weight. We want to work on your sleep, all of that kind of stuff. And then, yes, of course, we want to also make sure that you are eating good foods that are giving your body the nutrients that it needs, and that you're moving enough, which tends to come actually a little bit farther down the road. We want to get you with a little bit more energy before we start spending it on exercise. If you can't get through the day with the energy you have, then we have no business spending energy on things like, aerobic exercise or weightlifting or whatever your thing might be. Sometimes we actually have to cut back a little bit. So if you ever have any questions, you guys know you are always welcome to schedule a complimentary consultation with one of my coaches. We would love to help you with some of this. I know it is so overwhelming and there's so much both good and bad information out there. So there are several books that I'm going to link to in today's show notes. One is the book I just mentioned, The Fibro Food Formula by Dr. Lipton. We'll have that out there. Another couple of books that I think are really, really helpful. One is The Mood Cure There's also The Diet Cure. Both of those are by Julia Ross. It's all about your neurotransmitters. It's all about the amino acids, and it's all about how the food we eat helps with our mood, with our energy, so many other things. And The Diet Cure actually has the twist of how being on diets actually makes this problem worse. And so it kind of helps you understand like why your body is craving things. This is where I got the information about the ice cream and the cereal at night before bed straight out of her books. So those are two great books. There's also a really great book by Gary Taubes called Why Do We Get Fat? So I will link to that as well. Super eye-opening in the science. It's a little bit more technical, but it's a great book to read as well. All right, you guys, that is it for today's episode. Thanks for being with me for another Ask the Coach. And I hope you guys will go out and submit more questions. I love getting your questions. It helps me know what is interesting to you guys. And a lot of times it not only gives me content for these every 10 episode Ask the Coach episodes, but also gives me ideas of what you're interested in for the other podcast episodes. That's why we did the episode with Dr. Lipton on CBDs, because I got 4 or 5 different people emailing and Ask the Coach on CBDs. So please be sure and send those in. And don't worry, we will get you an answer when you email us, even though it might be a couple of months before we get to our next Ask the Coach. So we are in the process of getting the next 10 episodes together. We do these in sort of 10 episode blocks. And so we're putting together our episodes for the next few months right now. So if there's anything in particular you would like to hear about, by all means, let us know. Over the next couple of months, I hope to do a bunch of super fun things, have some of our researchers here on the podcast to talk to you about the latest fibromyalgia research. We still have our interview with Dr. Jared Younger coming up. I also am going to be doing a special podcast, hopefully, if this all works, do a special podcast with some of my coaches at our alumni retreat that is coming up soon. So stay tuned. We've got all kinds of fun stuff, and we'll see you guys back here in a couple weeks. Bye. And that wraps up another episode of the Fibromyalgia Podcast. If you're ready to see if working with a fibromyalgia coach can help you feel better faster, visit fibromyalgiapodcast.com, where you can schedule a complimentary consultation to explore your options. During this call, we'll discuss your fibromyalgia journey, what your needs and challenges are, and give you recommendations on how to reach your goals the quickest way possible. Thank you for tuning in today, and join us next time as we explore more ways to help you take back control of your life and health. My music and sound editing were done by Daniel Munkus at Subtle Soup Records. Podcast management and creative copy by Sonia Louise of Performance Podcasting.